Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to assume that it's morning for everyone that is joining right now. Maybe it's another time of the day, but you can always have second breakfast, I guess. Welcome in Hall 2. I'm going to be your host for the entire day. My name is Floor. And today, or this at this very moment, we're joined by Davide. Davide is the founder of DCODX, which is a cybersecurity firm focusing on bridging the gap between development and security. Today, he wants to share his personal experience, challenges, and successes as DevSecOps architect in implementing DevSecOps in different DevOps processes. Now, to all of his achievements, Davide is one of the first contributors to the OWASP mobile security testing guide and a member of the SANS advisory board and chapter lead of DevSecCon. Thanks, DevSecCon Netherlands. He's also a speaker at at international security conferences like Black Hat or OWASP, AppSec, DevSecCon, Hacktivity, and also a lot of the regional OWASP security events. On the personal sides, he loves to play racket sports, from tennis to padel, from ping pong to beach tennis. So if you're in the Netherlands, you should hit him up. Now I realize that sounded more like a threat than anything else.
It does.
But anyway. So Davide, whenever you're ready, please take it away. I'm super curious about this talk.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me today. So hello, good morning, everyone. Well, let's start. Well, you gave a great introduction about me, so I don't have to repeat myself. But as you said, I'm the founder of the Codex, where we focus on bridging the gap between development and security, and we focus mostly on DevSecOps implementation, DevSecOps migration, basically put that sec into DevOps. And this is what this talk is about. So I want to share with you my failures and my successes, right? So when did we first start talking more and more about DevOps? From the graph, I see it's more or less around 2012, 2013. The DevOps manifesto were first published in 2007 and 2008. And we can see that something starts moving around those years and keeps moving in quite a linear way. Well, I wish these were my investments, but they're not, unfortunately. DevSecOps instead seems to be mentioned quite a lot in 2004. No idea why. But if we normalize the graph, we can assume that the term DevSecOps started getting the right attention only after 2016, 2017. So that's almost a 10 years gap, okay? But it shows a very big growth in the last 5 years. So I would say better later than never. Now, let's put together these two graphs. I think we should observe a minute of silence for DevSecOps. The fame that DevOps has, right, in the last few years is not even comparable with the popularity of DevSecOps. But I think, and I'm confident that we will get there. And this is to say that security is still a step behind development. So today, as I said, I want to share with you some of the failures, but also successes that I personally encounter in my day-to-day job as a DevSecOps architect or security architect. And I hope to give you a good understanding of what to do and not to do when implementing DevSecOps or integrating security in your existing DevOps cycles. And I hope we'll have some questions at the end so we can discuss. Oh, happy to do that. So you start designing your DevOps cycle and figure out the best tools and solution to make this happen, right? So you start selecting tools for source control, version control, infrastructure as code, like AWS CDK, for example, Ansible, Terraform, serverless framework, whatever. You choose your virtualization, most probably Docker, and your orchestration, Kubernetes, logging, maybe through Elastic. Then you decide to include, your findings, your alerts in your backtracker like Jira, your documentation on Confluence, and your continuous integration, so CI/CD through Circle CI, GitHub Workflows, or GitLab Runners, right? So you ask different teams to implement their DevOps process. let's say you go on holiday. When you return, this is what you find, right? Beautiful, amazing. So hundreds of interconnected tools, actions, runners, scripts that work perfectly together, and development is going at speed of light. Everything is working perfectly. Till the security person is hired for security, and it's time to include security scanning as part of the SDLC. And I would say security in total as part of the SDLC. Now, before we start going to what I think works and what doesn't when implementing DevSecOps, I want to say that, well, DevOps brings a lot of benefit, right? Faster, better product delivery, faster issue resolution, greater scalability and availability, better resource utilization, but also greater automation, visibility, and innovation. Now, there is a big pro that is missing in this slide that I have in the next slide, and is the introduction of SEC, right? I believe that SEC should have been introduced in the concept of DevOps from the beginning, because it gives greater, faster, and cheaper security, right? Because why is it faster? Because moving to DevSecOps means that we are able to detect and react to security threats much faster, right? But it's also cheaper because we detect those threats much earlier in our development cycle. So we don't have to kick in our vulnerability policy, for example. We don't have to only work for 1 week to fix that problem, right? But we are seeing already this switch from security as afterthought to security must be embedded in our processes, right? So in March 2023, I think GitLab published a research where they asked a population of 5,000 developers and security people, what are the biggest challenges in software development in 2023, right? And as you can see from the responses, many responded security. Security is one of the biggest, let's say, challenges in software development, because security is still done in an old-fashioned way most of the time, so it's still an afterthought. But integrating in your DevOps cycle means that most probably you will have to deal with a lot of issues, a lot of false positive. But one of the biggest frustration with security testing, according to securities, are still the same as 2022, and I will say also 2021, 2020. Testing, well, one of the biggest issues is that testing happens too late in the development lifecycle, causing delays, right? And we see a small reduction in 2023 of this information, but it's still difficult to prioritize vulnerability remediation, right? There are too many false positive. Everybody's dealing with false positive. Everybody doesn't like false positive. It's difficult to track vulnerability status because most probably you have to deal with different tools, different command lines that have different outputs and different criticality as well. And testing is not sufficiently frequent or consistent, right? So my question for you is DevSecOps ever going to match the success of DevOps, right? So I'm writing in the chat, what you think, because I believe yes, and but maybe we'll not talk about DevSecOps anymore, but just because Sec will be directly embedded in the word Dev, and this is what I believe it should be. Right? So one of the quotes that I really like is this one from Polar Squad that says that what I love about DevOps is that in the end, it's all about people. And it's right, it's true. But I want to make a small correction to this quote. And I want to say that what I love about DevOps is that in the end, it's all about culture. So culture is what makes the difference, right? And I think we also heard in the keynote the terminology culture. But what is culture? What is a good culture? What is a bad culture? What is a poor culture? Well, I will give you two examples to understand better what security culture means. But at the same time, I would like to make this talk interactive and have maybe some food for thought, some questions at the end. So please write in the chat, how does the security culture look like in your company? So as I said, I will give an example of poor security culture. What I think is a pure security culture is culture where there is only maybe one security person for 1,000 or maybe more developers. The security person owns the security of the product, right? Security reaches out to development, so not the other way around whenever there is an issue. Security approves every change before going to production, okay? So developers need to wait for a security review every time they want to push something to production. And the company relies on a compliance pen test done once a year to prove the security posture of our product. So let's say it's Friday, 4 p.m., and a security tool shows a critical issue in one component that cannot be fixed in a short time frame, right? Release to production is due by end of the day, let's say. Now, a poor security culture is a back and forth between security and development with no solution. Eventually, this will escalate to the product manager, to the CISO, or even the CTO, that will then contact security, that will then contact development, entering an infinite loop. This is what a poor security culture might look like, right? What I think instead is a strong security culture is when security and development work together to provide the best risk evaluation of the issue, right? Possible short-term, but also a long-term remediation. In the example, the remediation will be to update a library, but maybe a library cannot be updated right away because it has a lot of dependencies. So what should we do first? How do we, what is the short remediation for this issue, right? So from the perspective of a security engineer that works in a company, the security person will interact with the development asking, like, is there anything that will mitigate this that I haven't understood or I haven't found, right? Or let's test it if we can. Or does this have an impact? We think it does. So the GitLab research, and it's a great research, so I recommend to download it and have a look at it, shows that the developers are the ones that can spot and fix more and more vulnerabilities. We see that in 2023, 50% of the vulnerabilities were spotted by developers, right? Now, as I said, this talk is focusing on what I think fails or it failed for me, but also what I think succeeds, right? And the first pitfall that I want to share with you, and I think we already mentioned it in the previous slides when we talk about culture, is that security is not part of development, okay? So if we lay down the infinite loop, right, the infinite DevOps cycle, one of the pitfalls that we often see when we work with different customers is that security is still an afterthought, right? The only security is done when code is already released via a pen test, so a penetration testing or a vulnerability scanning, or the security team will do some checks already in production, or when everything is already coded, everything has already been tested from a UI, UX, and functionality perspective. And I can tell you this does not really work. Why? Well, we can't, if we use this approach, we can't discover complex logic flows that will be found during the design phase, for example. And here I'm talking about secure design reviews, and I'm talking about threat models, right? This approach here is very expensive because developers will need to go back to old code to find the fix, or even worse, maybe change the design and retest everything once everything is already released to production, right? It will take weeks or maybe months. And the third problem is that the coverage will be defined by whom will do the pen test and also the time allocated for it, right? So every finding that is found in the pen test or in the vulnerability scanning will kick in your vulnerability remediation policy. And this means that developers will be pressured to provide a fix in a short time frame. So this doesn't really work. And we know that this is very expensive. And one of my favorite diagrams that shows this concept is the one from Jones Cappers, where we can clearly see how more expensive findings are when detecting after release. And of course, we're not talking all about security finding, but we're talking also about quality and any issue that is detected when it's too late in the SDLC, right? So we want to do better. How do we do this better? well, development and security need to work together. So how do we do it? That where we want to implement security in different phases of the development lifecycle, right? Developers know their product best, so they know where the issues can be, right? And working together with security will empower, the research of vulnerabilities in the product. But one of the things that I think is very important here is that security must know coding. The concept where security doesn't know coding, doesn't understand coding, doesn't work anymore, right? And on the other hand, I think teaching security to developers and development to security is key to have a successful DevSecOps program, right? Now, pitfall number 2. All the tools in one shot, okay? So one of the biggest pitfalls that must be avoided when shifting to DevSecOps is to try and add as many tools as possible in the development cycle. So SaaS tools, SCA, Dust, IAST, Secret Scanner, Docker scanners. I mean, all these tools have different dashboards, different rules, different speed, and different capabilities, right? Training people on the capabilities of the tool and the output is not going to be an easy task if we have multiple tools at once. But also we will have so much noise that we need to deal with that is going to, well, slow down our development 100%, but it will also create some frustration in the development team. I will go crazy if I see all these tools and the output of these tools at once, right? When I try to just push a small code through my pipeline. So, and also the amount of issue that will be raised will most probably be put on the backlog and will never, be picked up by the development team. So how can we start here, right? What I would suggest is to start small. Start with 1 or 2 tools. And I highlighted here 2 main tools. That are the SaaS tools and the SCA tools to detect vulnerabilities in code that we own, right? Code that we create, but also code that we use, like open source or third-party code, right? And expand once you have matured the processes around the tools, right? So the question that you need to ask yourself is, do you have a security policy defined to react on issues, right? So focus first on high and critical issues. Define who is responsible to review the findings and how, okay? So if you think that security needs to review all the findings all the time, then that's wrong, right? Define who approves false positive and how can we minimize them. And one important thing that you should have in your tool is to generate SBOM, so the software bill of materials. So know what components you are using and whether these components are vulnerable or not. Okay, so how do we start? Well, I think when we start implementing DevSecOps or migrating to DevSecOps, there is a great resource from OWASP. There is DevSecOps maturity model, so DSOM. And it's a great resource to start building your DevSecOps processes because it gives you 5 different levels, from basic, so understanding of security practices, to advanced deployment of security practices at scale. So we want to start, the first thing that we want to do is we want to assess our maturity against this model and see in which level we fall, okay? And then start growing slowly and gradually towards level 5. Of course, you might not be reaching level 5 depending on your processes, on your structure, on your product, but the idea is to, lean towards level 5. And one of the biggest benefit that this maturity model has, of course, is to have a lean DevSecOps process to follow the right steps at the right time, but also it will allow you to stay compliant to standards like the ISO 27001, or comply to another maturity model that is the OWASP SAM, right? Okay, so pitfall number 3. Let's say now that we have the right number of tools, right, that we are carefully selected based on our maturity, it's time to make these tools more and more development friendly. So we want to integrate their results into our backtracker. And why do we want to do that? Because this will help the development teams to treat security issues with the right priority and quickly assign them to team members. If we don't do that, well, our findings will live in our security tools, and findings will never be picked up on time or will live there forever. Now, the question is, how do we want to do that, right? Do we want to import all the findings? Well, no. So if we look at the flow that we defined before, right? How do we modify it to integrate automated issues creation? Well, my suggestion is to have only the findings that break our company policy will be imported, right? The best way to do that is to have a two-way integration so that the development teams does not have to log in to the security tools, but all the findings will be handled, for example, in Jira or on any other bug tracker that you might be using, right? And these are very important steps to take because we want to facilitate vulnerability mitigation on time, right? And prevent that findings will pile up in the tool, but also on our backlog. And then the security person will just start contacting the development team saying like, okay, you have 55 findings to mitigate before the next release. And maybe the release is next week, okay? Now, pitfall number 3, false positives, right? Okay, so we integrated our bug tracker, right, in our process. So all the vulnerabilities are imported in Jira, let's say, okay? So congrats, you now have 50,000 plus tickets in your Jira board that you need to deal with. Well, I think if we do that, we just put the development team on fire. So including tools in your DevSecOps process mean most probably that you will need to deal with false positives. And false positive, nobody likes false positive. Let me say, I don't like false positive, of course. But false positive are part of the process and will never go away. So we need a process to deal with them. Not defining a process, to deal with false positive will result in big frustration, and maybe we will abandon the tool because we think that the tool is not good at finding vulnerabilities or issues, but it's just making noise, right, and slowing us down. So how do we remove or at least minimize false positive? Well, first of all, only scan production code. What I see more and more is that, when we have security, when you integrate security tools in pipelines or in repositories, scan is not only production code, but also test code, but also code that will never be shipped in production. So make sure that you remove test and debug code from what you are scanning, okay? And the most important thing is to focus on high fidelity findings, okay? So the tools today compared to the tools a few years ago can give you a good understanding of what findings might be a true positive compared to findings that might be a false positive. And you should use this information to prioritize what to work on first, right? So once you've done that, I would say that if you've never done a scan before, if you never used a security tool before, don't start with integrating the tool directly in your pipeline, but start with manual scans, right? Start with manual scans to reduce noise, to identify the right issue, to tweak the scan, to reduce the amount of issues that are not relevant for you. And once you've done that, the tool will remember, and then only then you can start integrating automated scans, right, in your pipeline, for example, and you will see that results are much better. There is much less noise coming from the tool. Now, pitfall number 4, one security pipeline. So Wiring to Rule Demo is one of my favorite movies, so I decided to put it here. So whether we're migrating from DevOps to DevSecOps or starting directly with DevSecOps, right? One of the things that could make the project fail is to generalize the whole approach, right? Especially when defining automation. And maybe this is not really related to security, but it's very important for security. So like integration tests are different per product, security testing are also different, right? And they vary based on technology, maturity of the team, that is very important, but also release cycles, for example, or branching strategy. So speed is one of the crucial element of DevSecOps, and product complexity will impact the speed of the security scanning, introducing delay, but also introducing false positive. And at the end, will make the team execute scans outside of their release cycles, right? So let me know if you are already doing that. And this is not what we want, right? We want to have the right repo structure, the right branching strategy in place in our CI/CD. That it depends on the project, depends on the team, right? Because these are two factors to take into consideration when creating automation, right? So my advice is to find the best fit for your pipelines, right? And how to find that? Well, adopt a risk-based approach, right? So define security scanning and pipelines based on the risk of your project. You don't need to have 5 security tools for a static web page that maybe never changes, right? What you need to define in your pipeline, the amount of security tooling and the type of security tools and security controls that you want to define in your CI/CD, in your automation, really depends on the risk level of your application. Okay, and choose your tool wisely. They're different, right? They solve different problems. Consider when choosing the tools, well, 3 main things, like speed, quality, of course, of findings and results, and integration, because you want to have that integration that we discussed before, right? So how can you do that? Well, if we name some of the tools that you will probably have integrated in your pipeline, well, secret scans. We'll do secret scans for every change, right? Because secret scans are fast. Secret scan is easy to do, right? You want to match your secret, you want to find your secret in code, in static code, and it's very fast. It doesn't impact your delivery, it doesn't impact your release cycle. But when it comes to SAST, right, doing SAST on every change is not really ideal. So consider doing it first on merge requests or pull requests, on protected branches, right? And whether you decide to scan only new code or always scan the full project, depending on your product, well, that's when you really need to focus on what is the best tool for me to do that, like which tool will give me results fast and with great quality. Okay. Pitfall number 5, missing Git security posture. So now we are at that stage where we got our tools integrated. We dealt with false positive. We customized our pipelines. Are we good to go? Well, we're still not done, right? Because one of the biggest security failures of the last couple of years has been the supply chain, right? Supply chain attacks are one of the most complex to identify, because the root of the attack lies in something that we do not control, right? And although I have this pitfall on number 5, it could easily be number 1. Okay, so what do we need to do? We need to take control of our Git posture. And how do we do that? We want to harden our version control and pipelines. Okay, so we want to make sure to ship that. We want to make sure that what we ship is what we package, and what we package is what we code, right? We want to check our Git posture. So whatever version control you're using, we want to check our Git posture against policies. For example, what you see in the slide is one of the tools that we currently use and developed in-house that we're going to open source soon. So follow us on GitHub. That enable us to quickly understand what is the Git security posture of a company, right? And for example, do you have protected branches in place? And if you have protected branches in place, are you dismissing reviews or dismissing approvals on merge requests when there is a new commit, right? Or are you enforcing configure restriction for administrator, and so on, right? What are the rights of your collaborators, or when was the last commit of the project? Is it time to maybe archive that project, and so on and so on. But also, do you have high and critical open issues for longer than your vulnerability policy says? Okay. The second thing to do is to harden your pipeline, right? So, do you see anything fishy in this light? I think so, right? Because the run script that we see on the slide uses a user controllable field in a run field, right? Because in this case, the title is the title of the pull request. And this will allow any actor, right, any external actor or anyone that can create pull requests on our project to create a malicious pull request title to execute command on our container, right, on our runner, for example. So if we create pull request with the following title, so a double quote ls GitHub workspace, then we can list the full GitHub workspace whenever this run script is executed, right? So the output will be something like that. And of course, you might say, okay, why are we listing the GitHub workspace? Well, this is just an example, but what we can do, actually, we could access sensitive files or secrets that are defined in our CI/CD, right, in our runner or in our Docker, that then we could exfiltrate, and then we could use to compromise further the company or the whole Git, right, or the whole version control accessing private code. So what are the best practices to follow here? Well, first of all, if you can, use actions or runners instead of run scripts, right? So avoid shell scripts. But if you need to use run scripts, and of course you do, well, avoid to include user-controlled fields in your scripts, in your bash, for example. So do not pass untrusted input like title, descriptions, or comments that everybody can control. Okay. Scan your pipelines for security vulnerabilities. So we do not want to scan only our code, right, or our third-party code, our open source libraries, but we also want to scan our pipelines for injections, for secrets. Restrict permissions for token. This is something that must be done always. And if you know it, or if you don't, use the OSSF scorecard. So on the website securityscorecards.dev, you can find more information. It's a open source scorecard, and it gives you an idea of your security posture, of your Git security posture, right? At the end of the talk, I'll put the link in the chat as well. Okay, so one thing that make developers slow down is the security review of every merge request. How many of you need to deal with this? Okay, let me put this bluntly. Security does not need to review any pull or merge requests, right? If you have something like this that is implemented in your company, well, you might want to consider to change it. Why? Well, there are two main reasons, I believe. Well, security, as we said, for one security person, there are most probably hundreds or thousand developers in a company. So security will be overwhelmed by merge requests or pull requests that most of the time do not include security risks, right? And this will put the release pressure on security, and security then cannot focus on providing better services, right? But also developers rely on security to spot security issues in this case. So they don't feel responsibility to double, triple check the code for security issues. Okay, so how should we do it? Well, again, this is a recurrent topic in my presentation. Adopt a risk-based approach, because, well, security does not have to approve every change in the code, but we can definitely fail our pipeline, based on our policy. For example, if there are high or critical from our tools, but only add security to merge requests or pull requests automatically when security knowledge is needed. How do we identify this security knowledge? Because it might be a very wide concept. Well, adopt a model to identify security sensitive changes. For example, adopt a OWASP ASVS application security verification standard checklist in your development cycle. One thing that we implemented for customers to have a checklist before us automatically put in the merge request the developers must fill in to identify whether the changes in the merge request impact one of the item in the checklist. And if not the case, security is not needed in the merge request approval. But in case something is checked, then security will be updated automatically. This will filter out a lot of requests a lot of security reviews that are not needed. So this is an example from Sonar Cloud implementing the checks from ASVS at code level, but maybe you want to do it even one step before, right? You want to do it a merge request level before even running the scan. So if you're touching one of these sections, then add security for review. Threat model. I love this suite. So when we hear threat model, we run away. Everybody runs away. Why? Well, there are different reasons. One of the reasons that I hear the most is our DevSecOps process is too fast for threat model. It doesn't fit, right? Threat model is too complex. Or we always need security to do threat model, so we have no time, security is busy. Or we will do it once and then we will forget about it. But the best one is documentation is an old concept. Well, let me tell you, all these arguments are false, right? And I can tell you why. Well, these arguments are false because maybe what is true is that how you're doing threat model is wrong. So how do we do it in a fast DevSecOps process, right? Well, first of all, we want to adopt a model that will help us categorize and identify a set of threats. And of course, security is there for that, right? To help you identify what is the best model and what is the best process to embed threat model in the development cycle, right? Now, an old concept of doing threat model is to sit down for hours with development team, business owners, product owners, and discuss threats around your product. Well, with DevSecOps, this doesn't really work anymore. So what I would suggest is to do threat models in your planning tool. Do it directly in Jira, ServiceNow, whatever planning tool you have. And AI can, of course, I had to put AI in these slides, can help speed up the process, can help you generate automatically some of the threats that then you can discuss about. And of course, you shouldn't limit yourself to the results from tools. There are tools, as you see in the slide. I put one of the tools that can assist you with threat modeling directly issues in Jira. But you should really follow the model, for example, the threat model from Microsoft to identify threats and write the threats directly in the issues or in the tasks that are in your bug tracker or in your planning tool, right? So what do you need to discuss when defining threat? Well, for feature X, you want to identify three things, right? What can go wrong? What are we going to do to remediate it? And how do we avoid it forever, right? And if you have this information in Jira in your issue, well, this is a great sharing. There's a place for sharing knowledge, right? The team will work with Jira continuously, so this information will be always available. Okay, so what are we looking for when we do threat model? For example, web application. Well, we want to consider the OWASP top 10 list, right? We want to consider the top 10 threats that can affect the highest risk, the high risk threats that can affect by our products, right? Or for cloud, for example, for if we want to do a threat model on our cloud instance, then we will go with the egregious 11 from Cloud Security Alliance, and this will give us a great starting point to identify what to focus on, right? We want to have a top 10. We don't want to go wild while doing threat model because it might take ages. Okay, so really focus on the high risk threats and do threat model as part of your development cycle. So in your sprint planning, don't make it a separate meeting that is 5 hours or 1 month from now. That will not work in a fast-paced DevSecOps process. Pitfall number 9, compliance security trainings. How many of you love compliance trainings? Let me know in the chat. But this is a pitfall for me because company-wide security trainings for developers do not really work well. They're a good base, but hours of slides and videos with a final quiz do not really help in the cause of building a good security culture, right? Many times I've seen language-specific trainings. Those are great, but if they limit the knowledge and the training to slides, that's not going to work. So one of the best examples I've seen is like a company developing Go, but trainings, security trainings in Java. All right, good choice. So what should we do instead? Well, first of all, I think we should identify people interested in security inside the different development teams, right? And create a security champions program. How do we create a security champions program? Well, create, first of all, a security champions curriculum and teach security champions to work with their code, right? Assign hands-on training, hands-on security trainings to security champions. And the security champions will be a great resource for the team that will share knowledge with the team. And of course, this should not be limited to security champions, but if you can scale that to the whole development team. A very important topic when creating security champions program is reward. No reward, no security champions program. So make sure that you identify the right reward for the developers that are stepping up, to take on security tasks in their team. And one thing that is working and brings interest in security is company-wide capture the flag, right? So hacking is always fun, but if it's done like one day, maybe 2 days, and not right every day. Of course, trying to hack your own product always. So key takeaways, a road to success. I want to just the last slide as a wrap up. What I think is very important to have a successful DevSecOps process is to include security as part of the development process. I think this will be a recurrent topic in other presentations as well. You've seen it already. More important, start with 1 or 2 tools like SaaS and SCAs. Tools are not the solution, but your process is, okay? Start building your process first, not the tools, okay? Adopt a maturity model and stick to it. Choose only one. Don't jump from one maturity model to another, right? Integrate vulnerabilities in the developers tools, right? We don't want to go log in on different tools, different dashboards, but developers work with developers tools like Jira, Confluence, and ServiceNow, whatever. One great concept is developers are in charge of defining their pipelines, right? Do not, as a security champion, do not force one security pipeline for everyone, for every team, for every product in your company, okay? That doesn't work, that doesn't scale, okay? Involve security only for high-risk change or whenever there is a need or there is a question from the development team. Do not add security team as approver for all merge requests or pull requests, okay? Do continuous threat model. And why I put the word continuous here? Because, threat model, again, is not a one-time exercise, but do it continuously. It shouldn't be hours of meetings with security, but it should be a 15, 30 minutes max discussion around the new features that are planned in the sprint planning, for example. Improve your Git security posture, right? If we have all the best tools that can protect our code, but then our Git security posture is weak, then we're doing something wrong, right? We want to make sure that our Git security posture is pretty strong. So use scorecards for that to identify the weak points, right? And select custom hands-on trainings for security champions or for developers. Okay. All right. This concludes the talks. If there are any questions, I'm happy to.
All right. So thank you for that wonderful talk. I took a lot of screenshots to take notes.
Thank you.
Later, because there was a lot of text on the slide, so typing didn't cut it. I actually had a question about the Security Championship program, and then you mentioned it. So fantastic.
Perfect.
You already answered my question. Then I would love to know from you, while we wait, maybe some questions will come in because we have a little bit of a delay on the stream, for people that are maybe less technical within the company. How can we make them aware and make security something that is, I wouldn't necessarily say fun, but not as daunting for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, security doesn't have to be daunting or boring, but indeed it should be fun. Of course, it's not the biggest fun that you can have in your life, but for less technical people, I think the security team has a big responsibility to make security approachable, right? And that means that security, of course, works a lot with developments, but security team needs to be able to explain concept in a simple way, right? Or vulnerabilities in a simple way, and bring also examples or real life examples. We don't want to bother, right? The security team doesn't want to bother product managers or CTOs with maybe attacks or vulnerabilities that might not be actually valuable for the company, but identifying the right risk, right, and bring it down or to less technical people with example that might trigger their attention, right? And one thing that I see that works quite a lot, of course, is reporting and proving and showing how security is speeding up the development, right? And is improving also the customer feedback, or is able to respond to customer requests as well. So,
yeah. So at one point during your talk, you talked about what is good security culture. And the first thing that came to my mind was blameless. Like otherwise people, because otherwise people might be afraid if they made a mistake, or and they wouldn't feel comfortable enough or safe enough to bring it up. So is that
that's
something?
Totally correct. That's totally correct. Blaming people never works for anything, and especially with security. Security is there to provide more information, right? So when vulnerabilities are identified, it's nobody's fault. It's just that actually it's a good thing we have more information around our code, right? And we can improve our code. So I see security tools like quality tools. Do we blame people for quality issues or testing issues as we do for security? I don't think so. So security is I see security as a support instead of nobody needs to be blamed for having alerts or red lines in the security tools. But indeed, it should be more of a constructing and learning process around this information.
I love that. Security as a supporting function is a wonderful way of looking at it. Let's have a quick look if we have any more questions. And otherwise, I would love to thank you for this talk. It was super important. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you for inviting me.
I hope that you will join us in the chat in the Pine platform. And if there's any more questions from people, or just to enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good.
This is all we got. Remember the revolution in our minds. This is all we got. Lock me out of this life institution. I am angry and I am illusions. Yes, I hate, but it's not a solution. Try my best, but I'm just a human. Oh, we don't need to say we're sorry. We don't need to worship ever stop.